Hello, good afternoon. Like the thumbnail suggests, this review is for Dayworld by Philip Jose Farmer. So I've got this rather nice little book. It's kind of a wraparound cover art, and while the cover art doesn't really necessarily address anything in the book, it's still futuristic and it's pleasant and it's enjoyable. Okay, this is a Panther science fiction from 1985. So this would have been possibly the first published Panther in Great Britain. I can't off the top of my head see any location where the artwork is credited either, but I haven't looked extensively. So Philip Jose Farmer, an author that I read a lot of in my youth, but not so much recently. I kind of went off his writing for a while. It became, I felt, a bit predictable, and he had a few weird quirks that I wasn't into. Now recently, along with Chris over in Liminal Spaces, we did a buddy read on To Your Scattered Bodies Go, which is the first in the Riverworld series. Really enjoyed it. There'll be a video on Liminal Spaces channel one of these days, I imagine. At the end of it, I felt like I'd gotten into that vibe of the Philip Jose Farmer writing style. And I felt very much like going on to another book by the same author. Now that's a bit unusual for me. Normally I like a break from one author to another before going back to the series. But I was really keen on more Philip Jose Farmer. And if I'd had the second book in the Riverworld series, I probably would have gone straight onto that one. Since I didn't, I went on to Dayworld, a book I picked up not that long ago, and which my sister told me I absolutely had to read. It was her favourite hit, Philip Jose Farmer. I wasn't sure I'd ever read it before. I'm still not sure about that, to be honest. Now, Dayworld was published in the 80s, possibly in 85, actually, making it a book that Jose Farmer wrote 10 years or a little bit more after he wrote To Your Scattered Bodies Go. And I feel that this is a much more contemporary book in writing style. And if you want to get into Philip Jose Farmer writing and you're finding the 60s and 70s books a little bit too difficult, maybe try one from his 80s. Maybe try Dayworld, which I enjoyed. So the premise in Dayworld is that in the 35th century Anno Domini, you've got a level of tech and overpopulation which intersected to create a unique world structure. So there's a preface which talks about where the idea came from, and there's a new era calendar in the front, which I admit I didn't really read. But the notion here is that in this 35th century, the world population is actually only ever 1/7 living at a time. So this particular technology that has enabled it is called stoner technology. And since I believe stoner is a pretty common slang phrase throughout the world for someone who smokes too much weed, I gotta say at no point did the stoner technology not make me at least chuckle a little bit. But in Dayworld, what stoner means is some tech which allows the object to freeze completely and utterly at a molecular level. And what this means is, for example, for a restaurant or food supply, you stone the coffee or the meal, and when it's de-stoned, it is exactly how it was when it was stoned. And that has led to a unique way of coping with world population. Of the entire population of the world, only 1/7 are awake at any one time. So you have a population of Monday, you have a population of Tuesday, you have a population of Wednesday, and they don't intersect. There's only you only live one day at a time, hence Dayworld. And the stoning technology is described at one point as being so specific that you can stone a pregnant woman on Tuesday, and the next Tuesday she awakes exactly as she was when the stoning was applied. So this is an innovative concept, and it isn't dumped on you the way I just dumped it on you. You learn it very organically, if you'll pardon the pun. And why it's a pun, I'll explain in a second. So when Dayworld starts, we're following Jeff Caird, or Card. I'm not sure how to pronounce Caird I'll say Caird. So he's in the last few minutes. Jeff Caird is a Tuesday person, and he's in the last few minutes between Tuesday. He's desperately trying to get to his cylinder so that when Tuesday officially starts, he can be seen by his Tuesday wife, he's got other wives and other days, let's not talk about that yet, as having emerged into Tuesday at the same time as her. And that's how, right from the start, we learn that Jeff Caird is a daybreaker. Instead of just living his allocated one day at a time, he lives in every single day. Now, the desperate rush to be in the cylinder at the right time gives us all the information we really need to follow Jeff Caird and our world building of Dayworld. The other thing we learn about Caird fairly early on is the way in which his daybreaking works is because he's also part of this group called Immers. Immer, not quite as in immortal, but with the two M's and sounding similar. So Immers have decoded a organic technology that allows their life to be prolonged. And that's how Jeff, who's living 7 days in a week instead of just one, can seem to only age at the same rate as friends and family who are all Mondays or Tuesdays or whatever. Now, so already we've got a lot of things happening. We've got Jeff Caird and his day breaking because he lives in every single day. We've got this secret organization of Immers, which you learn most about in the early part of the book. They're very powerful. They've got people in key positions. Their long-term plan is apparently to overthrow the government and bring in something that's a little bit closer to what they want a government to be. But they don't seem to be planning at any point to be giving this immortality or youthful technology to anyone but their own organization. Now, in order for the Immers to do what they do, they need to be secret from the government, and that ties into all the plot lines which Jeff Caird's line develops on the Tuesday. So on Tuesday, Jeff wakes up with his wife Ozma, who's an artist. I actually really liked Ozma. She's an artist who paints insects and then releases them into the wild. I actually just kind of love the fact that Philip Jose Farmer sees the 37th century Anno Domini as having any insects left. Let's hope he's right and I'm wrong about that. So Jeff and Ozma have their normal type morning routine and interactions, and we see that part of the way in which this day living works is an apartment for 2 people can actually house 14, because most of them are in one room, frozen in their cylinders, and only 2 people are awake at a time. They've each got their own personal possessions locker, which only opens to them. And they've got these little identification discs which allow them to move within their day. Now, you're probably thinking right now, what stops everyone from day breaking? Well, that's in the novel and you should just read it. It's pretty well thought out and I like that notion. On Tuesday, Jeff works as an organic. Now, organic is a weird word and it's used throughout this novel in many different ways that remind me of the way we use green today. Green is a colour, but it's also many other things. You've got green politics, you've got green policies, you've got green companies, you've got green, and that's green for good. So organics seems to be a kind of similar word in Dayworld. And what Jeff actually does for a job on Tuesday is he's a cop. Now, once or twice you see people calling in pejorative words and they use cop and pig, but they themselves think of themselves as organics. But organics is used in other words, so it's a bit weird. It takes a while to foresee. Now, with Jeff as an organic, we get to see a lot of the tech they use to monitor the world. They've got something that seems like drones, and this was written in the 80s, remember. They've got a worldwide internet that's described as strips, which provides news and tracking and a whole heap of other things. A lot of the tech that you've got in Dayworld won't seem particularly unfamiliar to someone in 2025, but in the early 1980s, you still had to plug your computer into the back of a television and type in DOS to get it to play Space Invaders, so I'm going to call it in as pretty damn innovative. As Jeff is on his way to work as an organic that day, a number of incidents occur to set up the plot for the entire rest of the novel. First of all, he sees a man dropping a banana peel, and that's littering, and that's absolutely appalling, and no one does it. It's grubby, it's disgusting, so he goes to arrest him, but he can't. For a start, the individual, who he rapidly identifies as being called Rutenbeek, resists, and then he actually assaults Jeff, which is horrific and unheard of, and then he runs away. Jeff sets the other organics on him, but Rutenbeek isn't caught, and as a character he streams through the novel with bananas and banana peels, and also following the way in which he evades the cops is interesting. Second of all, Jeff Caird hears from other Immers who are on his same day, Tuesday, that there's this mad scientist, Castor, who has escaped. Now, Castor was an Immer, and here's an example of why the Immers are so careful about accepting someone new into their organization. Jeff himself was put forward by his parents and was accepted, but not everyone who's put forward is accepted. They have to go through psychological testing, and if they aren't stable enough, they're not accepted. Castor was accepted, but he's now unstable. He thinks he's God. He thinks that Jeff Caird, who as an organic arrested him, is the devil, and he's just broken out of the psychiatric unit in which he's being held by killing people. 2 murders in 1 year is absolutely horrific statistics by their standards. And the organics go searching for Castor, and the Immers do as well. Now, the reason Castor wasn't treated like many other criminals and psychiatric insane and ill are, and just stoned until you've got a resolution for their issue, is that before they could stone him, the officials would have truth tested him, and the Immers don't dare to have him truth tested because the truth misting is definitive, and if an Immer is ever truth misted, everyone will know about the Immers. That's the most incredibly bad thing they can imagine happening to them. Okay, so that's 2 of the ongoing threads that continue throughout this novel. A third is after Jeff arrives at work and he's starting to hunt out these information for the Immers, he hears that Snick, who is an organic from Monday or Sunday, I'm not sure, but who is a legal daybreaker, she's been given the authority to chase through the days so that she can pursue a particular person of interest. This person of interest is a Yiddish chess player with whom Jeff has actually played chess online. So you've got all these different characters and all these different narratives, and they all sort of chase tales around the book over and over again. All of them are interesting plots, and there's a lot there. Now, I enjoyed Dayworld. By the end of it, I'm more than ready to move on to another style of writing from Jose Farmer. And part of that is the thriller element. Dayworld is actually set up as a thriller more than... there's a lot of science and there's a lot of science fiction, and it's a good book in that regard. But the thriller element, I've got to say that in this book, Philip Jose Farmer has not demonstrated his ability to adequately write a thriller book. So I just don't think it's his meat here. For example, there's one point in which there's a shoot 'em up. Snick has been caught by the Immers, and Jeff doesn't want to see her killed, so he's hanging around. So there's Jeff, and there's some Immas who are there to clean up, and Caster appears on the scene, and maybe someone else does. So you've got all these characters, and they're shooting at each other, and there's this action. Now, normally in a thriller, those sort of scenes are really exciting, and you're really involved. I didn't find it that exciting. I found it a bit obscure. I don't think Farmer did a good job of describing the action or what's happening. Later in the book, there's this chase. It should be this amazing underground chase where Caird is being followed by Immas who are also organics trying to catch him. Again, you don't have this sense of imminent consequence either to the character or to the story. And while it's well written and it's well done, it falls flat as a thriller. I don't read a lot of thrillers anymore, but I used to read heaps of them. And the thrill is lacking here. Okay. Now, back to Jeff Caird. Jeff Caird is Tuesday. On every single day, he's got a different character. It's Tingle on one day. It's Father Tom on another. Tingle is the Wednesday, the second character that we encounter. And we see more of how Jeff moves from day to day, preparing himself to meet the next day. Tingle has a different wife. Obviously, she doesn't know he's an Imma. She doesn't know he's a daybreaker. And so you've got this whole new setup. Now, once again, characterization, I feel, isn't Farmer's best skill here. You've got all these different characters, and in one way, it's a great way to show different aspects of this world, because Tingle in the second day has his wife is another artistic type. She's a dancer. She's hysterical and high-strung and dramatic. And Tingle is a data banker. So when he goes to work, and I believe he works under another Imma, he goes searching for all this information, data banking. Now, as he works as an Imma, he's researching things for the Imma, including the question of Caster, who's ongoing. Caster himself is now daybreaking, going from day to day, searching down, we believe, Jeff Caird, who is, in his estimation, the devil. All these different characters didn't work so well. And the reason they didn't work well is a spoiler. So if you've watched up to here and you are reading this, or you think you might read it soon, which I do recommend, it's a really good book, first in a trilogy. But maybe stop right now at 18 minutes, I think it'll be, and come back to it when you finished reading. So, spoilers. We start with Jeff Caird, and then we move on to Tingle, and I can't remember his first name, and then from Tingle we move on to Wednesday World. Well, Wednesday World is Tingle with Nokomis, Moon Daughter, as his wife, and then we move on to a different character every single day. I was about 2/3 of the way through the book before I realized that what Farmer thought he was doing was he's setting up not only different characters for Jeff to be living in for each day, and I'm calling him Jeff because I can't remember them all, and that was the first character I encountered. These characters are meant to be wholly autonomous. So later on we have a character who's a bartender and wakes up with a hangover, even though Jeff has just lived that entire day previous without a hangover, and that hangover comes from a week back. Despite that, these later characters don't seem to have an awareness that they are Jeff Caird, and at one point when he's escaping, he types in a code and he goes, oh, well, it's lucky I've got enough of Will's character in me to know what the code is. Jose Farmer doesn't do a good job of describing these as separate individuals, and it starts off with Tingle, because Tingle was constantly being compared to Jeff Caird. So we understand that Caird has created Tingle by taking certain characteristics, more emotive, more impulsive, less specific characteristics of himself out and putting them into Tingle to make this other character. But we don't understand that Tingle is meant to be completely autonomous from Jeff and not even aware of him. That is not well presented. And these different characterizations, you have got too many versions of Jeff. Now, right at the end, when Jeff has broken away from the Immers and he's trying to escape the Organics, who know him as a Daybreaker, and he's trying to escape the Immers, who believe he's broken their orders and broken their law, you've got this internal monologue between all the characters in brackets. And it is exceptionally annoying. It's difficult to follow. I don't know who all these characters are. I really don't care. In brackets, this isn't like you, Zervan, Jeff Caird says to his later character Zervan, who's a religious preacher. He's a hypocrite, that's what, says Charles Om. I think that's the bartender. Of course he is Wyatt Earp. Wyatt Earp is a producer of a show that makes westerns, and you've got all this internal conversation that's actually a monologue in separate brackets, and I didn't love it. I couldn't follow it. It was happening during a chase scene, so this should be the thriller part, but it's too bogged down. So I don't think that was very, very well done. Onward to the end. The end is an interesting one. I like the idea that Jeff has managed to keep his thoughts secret from the psychologist, so he doesn't, his left hand doesn't know what his right hand's doing, and he's done this by insisting a new capsulated consciousness inside his brain that the psychologist isn't aware of. So that was a good ending to the book. I'm not wild to read the next one, but I do have Dayworld Rebel, I think is the next one, and I will be reading it shortly. I did really love the tech, and I've got to say, based on the 2 Philip Jose Farmers I read this year, I think world building is really his métier. He world builds like you wouldn't believe. He's got these amazing ideas, and he brings them into fruition. His 35th century world is fascinating. Also, by the 80s, he'd gotten away from this obsession that he had in his earlier books of doing weird sex stuff. Now, speculative fiction has always, or at least often, examined socio-political mores, and that includes sexual mores, and that's fine. Jose Farmer got pretty weird with that in some of his books, but here he doesn't. Even though Jeff Caird has a different wife, and in one case he's part of a group marriage of 3 couples at one stage, it's integrated well, and it's not as obnoxious as some of his earlier books, to be honest, are. However, Jose Farmer does something else here that is actually really exciting. In the 80s, names were very, very gendered. Rachel and Mary were gonna be women. Mark or Peter or Anthony were almost always going to be women, maybe not Peter, but Mark, I never heard of a woman who is Mark. In the early part of Dayworld, we've got this situation where Philip Jose Farmer scatters names and words for names all over the place, so you've got no gendering. And also, in 2025, when pronouns are such a big deal, the correct use of, the correct questioning of, the whole guilt about getting them wrong, the whole gendering thing. Here, in the early 80s, Philip Jose Farmer was already mixing his gendering in such a way that him is not always a male, her is not always a female. He's mixing the names and the pronouns and the genders in a way that is really actually quite good. That is not a spoiler, but I forgot to mention it in the non-spoiler section. It was intriguing and it was interesting. It mostly happened in the first third of the book, and then Farmer got into his whole thriller-esque action part, and it got left behind, which I think is a shame, because the world building and the genderization and the whole construction of this world, that was the best part about this book. The characters weren't, and the thriller not so much. Anyway, this next sequel is Dayworld Rebel, and I probably will come to that pretty soon, because world building is fantastic, and I imagine that the world building will continue into the next one and continue well. I expect to see Jeff Caird continuing. I don't know if his weird ability to create characterization is, but I suspect that the whole Emma society and the ability to prolong one's life are going to be a major overarch of the trilogy. I do recommend them. They're good books. Just give them time. And like I think I said earlier, if you're finding the early Jose Farmers have dated in their writing style, try his 80s. They are far more contemporary, they're easy to read, and they are enjoyable. Thank you very much for watching, and read good books.